Hi, I'm Jess, and I am going to be walking you through espresso training today and how to pull a shot. We are going to be going through some variables before we pull espresso, just to kind of break down the importance of it and everything you need to know before we move on to the machine. We just want to make sure that you pull the best espresso possible, and so we're going to kind of walk through it today and do a couple of steps. Before, we're going to talk about the first variable, which is going to be cleanliness. Cleanliness is super important with espresso in pulling it because there are tons and tons of oils in coffee. So when you're pulling espresso, you want to make sure that your basket is totally clean before you pull a shot. It's just because it affects the taste of the coffee. When you don't, oils can get rancid and get backed up in the portafilter, and that's not what we want to happen, so we want to keep this guy as clean as possible. The next variable that we are going to be talking about is water quality. With water quality, you want to make sure you have really good water because most of your espresso is made up of water. So if you have really mineral-based water, it's going to cause buildup in your machine, and it's going to make your espresso taste not that great. So making sure you have good, clean, filtered water is super important when you come to pull espresso shots. The last variable we will be talking about is the grind size. Grind size is important because it controls how fast or how slow your shots pull. So if you picture a screen and you put a pile full of pebbles and a pile full of sand over the screen and you pour water on top of each pile, which one is the water going to flow through faster? The water flows through the pebbles faster because there's more space in between. But when you pour the water over the sand, it goes through slower because there's less space for the water to pass through. Same goes for grind size when it comes to coffee. If you have too coarse of a grind and it's too big, the water is going to flow through way too fast and you're going to have under-extracted coffee. So your espresso is going to be tasting really sour and bright. And then on the opposite end, if it's too fine, then the water is going to drip through and you're going to have an over-extracted shot that's going to be tasting bitter and hollow. So what we're trying to find is that sweet spot in between. We are looking for around 27 to 28 seconds. So if your shots are pulling at 10 seconds, you're gonna wanna make that grind finer. And if that shot is pulling at 50 seconds, you're gonna make it coarser, just so you can make sure that it is always consistently 27 to 28 seconds when pulling your shot, so that when you pass it to your customer, it comes out tasting sweet and balanced, not too bitter, not too sour. So the next thing we're going to do is I am just going to walk you through how to pull a shot on your espresso machine. Now that we know all of the important variables before we pull espresso, let's go ahead and talk about what we do when we pull espresso. First thing we're going to do when pulling espresso is you want to remove the portafilter, which is this, from the group head inside of your espresso machine. When your portafilter is locked up into your group head, it creates all of this steam on the inside. So what you're gonna wanna make sure you do before putting coffee in your basket is just dry out the basket to make sure it's clean and there's no residue or anything like that in there. Next thing we're gonna wanna do before we pull our shot is we're going to weigh out our coffee. So you wanna make sure you put your portafilter on top of the scale and it is weighed out at 0. So now what we're going to do is put our coffee in our basket, or what we call dosing. So we're going to dose our coffee now. Perfect. So now after you dose your coffee, you're gonna wanna weigh it again to make sure that you have the right ratio. So ours is weighing out at 18 grams, which is perfect. And now what we're going to do is we're going to settle on our tamp pad. When we settle with our portafilter, we wanna make sure we settle it on this flat area right here and not on our prongs, because our prongs will break off. This little table right here is what it's made for. So you're gonna settle firmly twice, and then you're gonna tamp. So tamping, you wanna make sure it's a very natural hold. You're gonna wanna make sure that it's almost like a doorknob or a flashlight, having that tamp pressed against the meatiest part of your hand. And then you're gonna wanna make sure that your wrist is straight. The reason we do this is so that your wrist etiquette stays intact. We want to make sure that it prolongs the life of your wrist, because if you are doing this hundreds of times a day as a barista, it's really important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well as taking care of making sure your espresso tastes good. So we're gonna tamp. I've got my tamp held correctly. I'm not gonna be bending my wrist, and then I'm just going to apply pressure until I can no longer push down the tamp into the portafilter. It should lay flat into your portafilter like that. It shouldn't be uneven at all. So then once we do that, we're ready to start our machine. So we are going to lock up our portafilter. We are going to weigh out our shot glass so that it doesn't, so we can tear the scale. Then finally what we do is we're going to start up our machine and start the timer at the same time so you know what your shots are pulling at. And then we wait. And like I said, we want to make sure we pull within 28 or 27 seconds. Once we hit 27 seconds, we're going to go ahead and turn our machine off. And then we're going to weigh out how much output we had on our scale. So for our 1:2 ratio, we want 18 to 19 grams of coffee in the basket of the portafilter. And then we want the 2 ratio, so 27 grams of coffee as espresso. Once we do this, it's important, like I said, to keep your machine clean. So you're going to take your portafilter out and knock your puck into the knock box, like so. Clean it out again and lock it back up into your group head. And that's how you pull a shot of espresso.